Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSPs. This is to finish off my US election update. I did a full hour on picking up all the pieces that I thought were relevant to share with you concerning the debate. I will try not to mention the debate too much. There's a couple of bits of data coming out looking at polls post-debate that I think are interesting. We're going to look at some of the crosstabs in those. But I am going to be talking about all the rest of what's been happening that I wanted to mention earlier, but it would have made it about a 4-hour video. So anyway, and then I probably won't do another update for many days. So just purging all of this information out of my system. Hopefully it's useful and interesting for you. I find this stuff interesting, so what the hell? Okay, just interesting one from Darren Corrigan, who is a listener, a long-time listener, and member at the ATP Geopolitics and my Ukraine stuff. But he's a Republican, likely supporting Trump as a Republican. But he says, like most voters, I'm ashamed by what I did not know about Trump until you pointed it out. So interesting there, like there is. I have long worried that why we are seeing this persistent 46% of the electorate still supporting Trump and willing to support Trump. And you know my positions on him, right? They're all out there. I'm not a fan of him from a social, moral point of view. I think as a human being, he's not a nice person. He's liable for sexual abuse. He's up in court for a whole bunch of things. I don't like the man, okay? Why is it that he appeals to an awful lot of people still? And there's a lot to be said, and we'll talk about this later. There's a whole bit of data on how vibes are more important than actual substance and policy and ideology in a sense. So that's really interesting. So I think a lot of people who like him for the vibes. Like if you're going to be hard on immigration and migrants, and you as a voter find that as one of your top issues, then you kind of either forgive the rest of what he says or you grow to like the rest of what he says because this is so super important. But also I think there's a lot of people ensconced within an information bubble whereby they don't see out of it. So Darren, for example, if you are someone, I don't know if this is the case for Darren, if you're someone that just watches Fox News, then on Fox News for the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, you won't have seen any of the Republicans speaking at that. There were 7 Republicans, 2 a day virtually, that spoke at that convention. And Fox News did not play a single one of them on purpose, right? Because they are an actual campaign arm for Trump's GOP. Now, if you get all of your information from Trump or from the manosphere or both, the kind of right-wing ecosystem, you are never going to see anything that is remotely critical of Trump or the GOP. You will just exist in that information space. Now, you can argue the same for me, and that might well be true. I can tell you I see an awful lot of the other side, right? I have not blocked people like Elon Musk on my Twitter feed precisely so I get a handle on what is being mentioned. And there's an awful lot of conspiracy theory out there. There's an awful lot of incorrect mythology being pumped into that space. But I do get to see it. Hopefully, what I do is provide at least some people with the other side of the story. For some of you, I'll be just comforting you by just saying what you want to hear as well. Okay, I get that. Right, we're going to go over to the campaign now, which is what's been happening since Trump and Harris were debating. And the first thing is to remember that during the debate, Trump insulted Harris and she insulted him on account of crowd sizes. That got him angry, and he went, right, no one goes to see your rallies, and if they do, they're just bussed in and paid to be there, etc., etc. Actually, that's just empirically not true. We're just going to see this montage of the debate, this back and forth between them concerning these sort of claims and what each campaign's looking like at the moment.
I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies. It's a really interesting thing to watch.
Women, I won't be following you around to the hospital, monitoring.
And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
By the way, her crowds are zero. Her crowd, she's got no crowds.
And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you.
They take in the geese. You know where the geese are? In the park, in the lake. And even walking off with their pets.
Now, there's all sorts. This is to do with the Haitian migrants and eating pets and stuff like that. The important point in this montage for me is, her important point there was, he's not going to talk about you. And actually, this is really true. And this is the problem of the Trump campaign. So if Trump wants to win, he needs to start talking to the American electorate, talking to them, saying, what I am going to do for you. This is what I and my administration are going to do for you. So there's all this criticism of Harris's campaign that they are not giving enough substance, that they're not setting out their policy enough, etc., etc. But of course, Trump doesn't set out his policy. And I talked about this in a previous video, that Trump is an empty vessel that is rolled out in order to attract people with this kind of bombastic rhetoric that he has. He talks about immigration, blah, blah, blah. That gets people on board and they are attracted to that. And he reels them in like with that kind of rhetoric, but he's devoid of any substance and any granularity, any detail about what the actual administration that he is offering is going to do, what the future looks like for the US. Now, what that is for him and for the Republican Party, that has been developed by the Heritage Foundation in the form of Project 2025. Now, he's disavowed that because he knows it's actually polling deeply unpopularly. It's lacking in popularity because it's so divisive. It's about clearing out the government. It's about being really harsh on loads of social moral aspects. And on polls, that's not looking good. However, it is their plan. And it has been written by all the people around him. And he knows about it. He denies that he does, but he knows fully about it. He was at a conference talking to the people who wrote it and saying they've got a plan for us. And they were saying we're passing this through Trump, and et cetera, et cetera. He knows about it. He knew about it. It is the plan for the administration, which is why the Harris campaign is still talking a lot, and they should do, about Project 2025. But that's the detail. He, in all reality, he doesn't read, right? So he won't have read the 900-page document. And he gets by on regurgitating what he sees online in these information spaces, on Twitter, on Rumble, on True Social. He regurgitates that. He has people like Loomer, who's a right-wing extremist, around him, giving him information. You've got J.D. Vance with the same kind of ideology, I guess, talking about Haitians and pets, and then Trump regurgitates that, gets in trouble because it's completely unfounded. He doesn't really know. He's just regurgitating a load of nonsense that sounds good to him and thinks the audience would like. But the reality is he's not speaking to the audience about how he's going to make their lives better. How are you going to make life more affordable for someone going and doing their grocery shoppings, calculating how much they've got left over, having to put some food back because they can't afford it? You're talking about putting tariffs on everything, but the reality is all economists pretty much agree that wide-scale tariffs on everything will lead to almost immediate inflation. So he is not really doing a good job of being a serious politician with a serious platform and ideology and agenda to try and persuade his voters that's what is good for them and what he's offering, and it's not attracting people in the middle and people from the other side. Whereas Harris is doing a good enough job of that. Now, I say good enough because there's still more detail to come out. People are criticizing Harris, but she's only been in this race for 6 weeks. Try and write, I challenge you to go and write a policy agenda for an entire nation, for the biggest, most important kind of economy and nation on earth in 6 weeks. Go and put that together in 6 weeks. It's tough, right? So she wasn't going to be running for president, and then she suddenly was, and she's had to put all this together. So it will come. People were expecting it right away. She had to work out the debate get prepared for the debate. It was all about preparation for the debate. Now it's about putting some more meat on those bones, doing those interviews, doing interviews in different places, which apparently we are hearing that that's apparently happening. So she's going to be appealing to some of these more diverse demographics, including online and this kind of radio station, that not just going to your mainstream media, which is important. We get more information now from outside television and mainstream media. We get it online, as a new new survey came out and told us, at least in the UK last week. So this is, you've got to remember that this is about persuading people to vote for you, but not just your own base, people in the middle and people from the other side. He needs to get over 50%. He's got hard ceiling of 46%. Is he talking to the electorate? No. Is he talking to the voter in a direct way, saying how he's going to improve their lives? Not really.
My dog's been taken.
You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires.
I always liked him. I'm not going to watch him anymore. I'm not going to watch him because he's not legit. What he did, I'm not going to watch him. And his hair's not as good as it used to be, you know?
I'll tell you, I believe you.
I think he's referring to the one of the moderators on ABC saying that his hair's not good enough. I mean, look at Trump. I can't talk, but this is not serious substance, and it's that bombastic rhetoric. Now, some people like that, and his base seem to like that. They like to see him stand up there and insult other people, almost like it's on a school playground. Maybe it reminds them of being together with the school bully. If I'm with the bully, I'm not on the receiving end. So I'll be with the bully and then laugh when he's insulting someone over there. Maybe there's some kind of psychology like that going on, but that is not going to give mass appeal.
Deserve a president who actually puts you first.
The parents, Mom, Dad, they're so proud. She goes, come on, baby, you can do it. You saw it. Boom. Can't do it. She couldn't get it up.
And I pledge to you that I will.
My wife hates when I do this. She says it's so unprecedented.
Yeah, interesting. So, okay, well, we're going to now look at whether he was correct in stating that no one goes to her rallies. So this is the line at the Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania right now, waiting to see Kamala Harris speak today. The former coal town is fired up to elect Kamala Harris, and the turnout is amazing. This is why Trump is scared, says this source. Okay, what's important about this is she is going... First of all, this is Pennsylvania. That's sped up. That's a line outside. First of all, this is Pennsylvania. So she's been very clever. She's like, right, done the debate, won the debate. We'll look at the stats on the debate later. Now I need to go and target swing states and battleground states that are going to win me the election. And I'm not just going to do that. I'm going to go to certain areas. And in fact, Voting Trends, a YouTube channel I've been watching recently, talked about this in Pennsylvania, saying she needs to go to these, and which is where she's going. So this is a coal mining town. This is, you know, Trump territory in a battleground state that has gone to the Democrats and is on the wire. But she's going to the more rural areas, or areas where the Republicans usually get a little bit more of a vote. And she's trying to chip away at some of those percentages around these other sort of counties and districts in Pennsylvania, and of course going to Pennsylvania itself. Whoever wins Pennsylvania wins this election, is my opinion. And she's doing that. And then when you look at this, I mean, it's absolutely incredible. So fun fact, the Greensboro Coliseum is the largest capacity of any arena in North Carolina. So before she went to Pennsylvania, she went to North Carolina, which has again become what is a battleground state, and it's become one. It is in play for the Democrats. So Kamala Harris filling this to capacity is a big deal, a very big deal. When she wins North Carolina, of course, says someone who wants her to do so, she wins the election. And actually, that would be true. You know, if you're going to win North Carolina, you're going to win Pennsylvania. Now, you can have childish arguments about who's got the biggest crowds, but actually, Kamala Harris is getting more capacity crowds than he is in the same places he's gone to. He's not been at capacity she has. But it's also the enthusiasm that is being generated. And at some point, there has to be some element of this translating into votes. There has to be something to be said about enthusiasm and people queuing for that long and turning up into massive arenas to support Kamala Harris in a way that they weren't for Joe Biden and they aren't for Donald Trump to the same degree. As this same person says, people who filled the Greensboro Coliseum to capacity: Rolling Stones, Bruce Springsteen, Prince, Beyonce, Taylor Swift, Elton John, Paul McCartney, and VP Kamala Harris. Now, here we've got another one. Donald Trump said at the debate, nobody goes to Vice President Harris's rallies. This is Charlotte in North Carolina, so same place. And I think that counts for something, right? That's not... That is data. That is a data point that is important in trying to work out which direction this election is going in. Now, there's a caveat to apply to this video. So when Kamala Harris was talking about people are leaving bored and exhausted, this is Trump's rally in Wildwood where a lot of people were leaving. So this is someone who was there, said, this is my video, I've recorded it, this was people leaving. So he was still talking here. Like, that is him on screen. He is talking. I'll just mute that now. So this is while it was on, and there were crowds and crowds of, there were a lot of people just consistently leaving through his rally there. The flip side is, and CNN looked into this, so CNN did a bit of a report on this and said actually it was a really hot day. You can see it was a hot day earlier. People were queuing for quite a long time, as we saw in the Harris video, and there was a lot of heat exhaustion and people are tired, having queued for a long time. And when we spoke to some people, said CNN, that was the opinion that they were giving. It wasn't because they were bored and didn't approve of Trump, but because it's just been a long day. But it seems kind of weird, though, still to spend 6 hours or 3 hours or I don't know how long, queuing for a Trump rally. And then, that's the thing you're waiting to go to. That's the excitement and the sense of being there and seeing your idol or whoever, and then leaving 2/3 of the way through. I still don't get that. It's not like leaving a football match in the 85th minute where it's 5 minutes to go and you're losing 4-1. You're like, we ain't ever going to win this, and I've got to get my car out from the car park before everyone else gets it, or get to the train before, which often happens with football matches. No, this isn't like, you're not losing. This is a rally where you want this guy to win, and you want to be part of that experience, and you're leaving 2/3 of the way through the rally. So that is another data point. Make of it what you will. Now, when we talk about going back to the idea of Harris going to Pennsylvania, this is super important. MSNBC here to talk about it.
Kamala Harris is in Pennsylvania tonight, which may very well be the most important tipping point state in this year's election. Vice President spoke to a crowd of thousands in Wilkes-Barre. It's a former coal mining town in Luzerne County, a place Donald Trump won by more than 14 points in 2020. However, crucially...
So this is one of these kind of rural places. So this is Luzerne County, somewhere else in Pennsylvania. Probably it might not be. It might be the Wilkes-Barre place. It might be somewhere else, because they obviously do a number of different places. But as Chris Hayes says, this has been already chipped away at from 2016 to 2020. And what Kamala Harris is looking at doing is taking some extra percentage from here, from there, generating that enthusiasm and stealing a couple of those voters from the center or from the other side.
His margin in 2020 was slimmer than it was in 2016 when Trump defeated Hillary Clinton by 19 points. And keeping that trend going is the formula for statewide success in Pennsylvania. Kamala Harris needs to keep her attention on places like Wilkes-Barre, where she is not going to win outright, but she could lose by less than her predecessor did. And every little bit will help Harris get over the top and win the all-important state. Austin Davis is the Democratic Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania.
So that's exactly right. So it's just chipping away at these particular counties that are arguably pro-Republican, but just taking a few percent, adding to the trend that already exists there. So this is someone else saying, looking at the Trump a Trump rally. So what sort of... So the size of the rally there, a lot smaller. There's quite a lot of empty seats at the top. He could be caught at the wrong time. I don't know. Again, pinch of salt. But yeah, look up there. The whole quarter of that place is not filled, and that's nothing compared to that arena we just seen. So 550 lonely ass people showed up to this. Obviously, this person's not a fan. Pathetic Trump rally in Tucson, Arizona, and no one wants to. Yeah, etc., etc. When you talk about dogs and cats and blah blah blah. So okay. But I think that is again another data point. Now, talking about what's then being said in these rallies, as John Cryer says, these are straight up Hitler talking points. This is worrying. So again, like, it's about attracting and persuading those who are persuadable in the middle, and on the other side who are maybe disaffected with the other side. So for Trump, he's got his base. Forget about your base. You've done it. Don't worry about that. Don't say bonkers stuff that's going to really fire up the base. You've got that, right? Get the middle ground and try and get some disaffected Harris voters, maybe people who are upset about the direction of travel concerning Israel. Okay, might be difficult because you'd go even harder on Israel. I don't know what it might be. Maybe some of those RFK voters and that kind of person. But don't be saying bonkers things that is going to turn off the middle and everyone else. And then you look at what Harris is doing, and she's all about unity, etc., etc. And you can just see the massive difference in approach that these two campaigns have.
And illegal Haitians, and he came in, illegal Haitian migrants taking over a beautiful place. It was so beautiful. Springfield, Ohio. I was there. I campaigned there a while ago. Springfield, it was so beautiful. Now it's just, what a place.
And of course, it's really divisive, and it's also incorrect. So these aren't illegal migrants; these are legal migrants that have been given refugee status and are now, well, they're not illegal. It's just he's lying and talking about how it's a terrible place, and actually they've gone around there. You've had Republicans in Springfield complain about this, that there's now been bomb threats, schools have had to be cleared out because of all this divisive rhetoric that's been all this disinformation that's been spread concerning the migrant population, Haitian population and community in Springfield.
Can you imagine you have this small little community, all of a sudden you have 20,000 illegals in your community. Nobody knows where they come from.
He's literally said they're Haitian. Nobody knows. Like, I know you can talk about hyperbole, and it's just the way he talks. Yeah, but just stop it, mate. Let's just stop saying stuff that is just demonstrably false or nonsensical. Nobody knows where they come from. And we'll find out later. He says these Haitians, Haitian illegal immigrants. Well, they're not illegal. They are legal migrants. They are Haitian. Nobody knows where they came from. You just told us where they came from. Send them back to Venezuela. They don't come from Venezuela. You just told us they came from Haiti. What? And then you're wondering why he's not doing so well in the part. It's just word salad.
I'm angry about young American girls being raped and sodomized and murdered by savage criminal aliens.
Right. I'm telling you now, that is disgusting rhetoric. So imagine you are a legal Haitian migrant and you listen to this, or you imagine the people that are listening to that, and how they would then, if they believe that, how they would then look at those migrants and that community. Like, he has absolutely no empirical justification for what he's saying there.
And
let's just listen to that again.
Knows where they come from. I'm angry about young American girls being raped and sodomized and murdered by savage criminal aliens.
I mean, I could finish the video here and I'd be like, that's done. Like, if that's who you want to vote for, you and I have got just some fundamental differences, because I find that quite disgusting. Now, we're going to look at some of these claims in a while with regard to debunking those claims. And I did that in the last video with regard to criminality. Actually, I'll just very quick. Oh no, we'll come to that later. So again, on this campaign trail, this is him.
But I was very happy because I got the endorsement of the vice president's family. And I got the endorsement of the vice president's brother.
So people give Trump a bit of a free pass. When he makes these massive mistakes, and I'll explain the mistakes in a second, people just let him off. Whereas had Biden said that, they would have been going nuts about this. So what he's talking about, it seems, is the vice presidential nominee, Tim Walz's family. Famously, some distant relatives were wearing Walz's family for Trump, or Walz's for Trump, except they had an apostrophe there, and they shouldn't have had it. But, you know, that's what happens when you, well, whatever. Anyway, Walz's for Trump. And this was a big thing in his ecosystem, which is, oh, we've got Tim Walz's family turning against Tim Walz and voting for me. But they weren't like close family. This is like, I don't know, quite distant. So, but anyway, he's not the vice president. He is a vice presidential nominee and he's a governor, but he's not the vice president. So that's interesting. And then he says, I've got the endorsement of the vice president's brother. And I think who he's referring to there is Obama's Kenyan brother, who's got citizenship in the US, who's also a little bit off the wall, I think. But anyway, he's endorsed Trump. So he's conflated two people together here, neither of which are vice president.
But I was very happy because I got the endorsement of the vice president's family. And I got the endorsement of the vice president's brother. And even sent me a contribution. And I was very happy because Barack Hussein Obama, his brother, as you know, endorsed me. So, no, his brother endorsed me.
So,
but I was very happy because I got the endorsement.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe Tim Walz's brother is endorsing Trump as well. And I in fact, I probably should go and check that. Yeah, I think basically he's just sort of corrected himself after that. There's a whole thing about his family, that picture of the family, but they're quite distant. It's been fact-checked by PolitiFact and others. Does Tim Walz's family back Trump? Trump tries to use Walz's family against him and fails hilariously, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, no, it doesn't seem like that is the case. So he has just got that flat out wrong. And that is another incorrect claim there from Trump. So, you know, neither Walz is vice president nor Obama. Anyway, he gets away with that. Now, this is the same rally.
I was told if I got 63 million votes, which is what I got in 2016, you can't lose. Just get 63. I got close to 12 million more votes than that, and we lost, but we didn't lose. And we're never going to let that happen again in this country. I was told if I got...
Now, there's some rhetoric around that way. There's rhetoric he's using at the moment that skirts very close to, we won't let we won't let that happen again. Okay, we won't let us lose again. It's not going to happen. Or it's the idea that actually we're going to purge a government with Project 2025 and we're literally structurally change things so it can't happen again. And he said a lot of things recently that can be read in both ways that I think are incredibly dangerous. That kind of anti-democratic rhetoric is dangerous. Anyway, and then he says this.
So Pennsylvania, remember this when you have to go to vote. Okay, just remember this. 2,000% increase. It's a small... So
he's not in Pennsylvania. So again, if Biden had done that, people would have gone nuts. Trump does that, no one bats an eyelid. He's talking to an Arizonan audience and he says, hey, Pennsylvania, remember this. Now, what I think Harris has up her sleeve is Tim Walz. And I think I've been more and more impressed with Tim Walz's rhetoric. And oratory and his skills with delivering speeches. As someone who had never given teleprompter speeches, he's very, very natural. And I like the way he gesticulates and taps the lectern and stuff like that. There's a whole lot in this video that is well worth looking at from this speech that he gives. It's a really good Tim Walz speech. I'm just going to play you this clip though. Just one clip from it.
There's a lot of reasons. My God, too many to list the time we're here. A lot of reasons this guy shouldn't get anywhere near the White House again. But we have a responsibility and can to tell people what the alternative is, because what he did not do, he did not say one thing what he would do to make life better for the American people.
So you can see this is going to be a campaign theme for both Harris and Walz, which is like, he's not talking to you. And it's true. And it's good. This is a sensible thing to do. What is he saying to you concerning your life and how your life would be better? Like when he's talking about immigration, it's often on the southern border, scaring people concerning things down there. But someone up in, say, Pennsylvania or up in Wisconsin or wherever, like how is that as relevant to them? What's Trump doing? Now, of course, immigration scares everyone when it's demonized in such a way, but there needs to be a positive, and this is where Trump, I think, is failing. He's not generating a positive vision of the future for America. He's presenting a dystopian future if you vote for Harris, and he's presenting a dystopian present by saying he's doing down the US. He's always doing it down, saying it's terrible, everything's terrible, oh, it's awful, oh, migration, crime. And this isn't true, of course, like the data doesn't support his claims, but he's not being positive and unifying enough.
Not once. Remember,
sorry, the sound is not very good, so you can't, the crowd comes across really tinny and whatnot.
after he came down his golden escalator, he said this would be easy. This would be easy. I would have a healthcare plan on day one. That was 9 years ago. But look, it's progress, apparently. He has the concepts of a plan.
Really super important point. So again, doesn't have a plan for the future. So if I was in government for 4 years and had promised, so Trump 2016 to 2020, had promised the electorate who had voted me in that I was going to repeal Obamacare, the ACA, Affordable Care Act, and present a much better alternative, I would expect that I should have fleshed out those plans maybe 6 months into my tenure. If I was promising an infrastructure bill to my electorate whilst I was in charge of the country, I would expect 6 months at the most before that plan was presented to the electorate and delivered through Congress. On both of those topics, he did nothing for 4 years and yet promised it every single day. What's your plan to repeal the ACA and provide an alternative? What's your infrastructure plan? Then he had 4 years in the wilderness, 2020 to 2024. What's he done to develop that plan? So he's basically outsourced that plan making to Project 2025 authors of the Heritage Foundation and others. So right, go and write me a plan. They're going writing a plan, but he doesn't have the knowledge. So Trump literally is devoid of granular, detailed knowledge about politics and policy. I actually think Trump is not clever enough to run as president of the US. He's an empty vessel that gets rolled out so that other people who are clever enough but are nefarious and insidious and deeply problematic, they are the real power, the movers and shakers and ideologues. Trump isn't. He's kind of vacuous. When he's challenged on stuff, what is your plan for healthcare? Do you have a plan? Well, I've got concepts of a plan. That's what the Harris ticket is going to nail now. They are going to use that against Trump. And to be fair to Trump, like I'm not trying to be overly harsh here, but it is not good enough to run for president and not have a freaking healthcare plan. And that was the case 8 years ago. 9 years ago. How has that happened? What are you doing in this game? What is this about? But of course, it's not about healthcare policy. Like if I was running for president, I'd be like, how do I make my country a better place for all of these citizens in all these different domains? And I'd be thinking, oh, right, what's the best iteration of healthcare that will have the most success in all of these, with all of these metrics. I'll be thinking about, well, how do we provide that? He doesn't give a monkey's arse. He's like, yeah, I don't care, whatever you guys tell me. Immigration's terrible. Haitians eat geese. I'm cool though. And everything just comes back to him. It's just about him. Oh, I'm amazing. I'm this, I'm that. And you go and listen to any of his speeches and tell me, like, you should have a drinking game. Drink for every time he says how wonderful he is, or brings a conversation back round to, or I did the most, the greatest you've ever seen. It's the best you've ever. No one's ever seen anything greater than what I did. Every bit of this, just massive narcissism.
I taught high school for 20 years. Every one of my kids, every one of my kids had a better excuse for not doing their work than that. They never told me they had a concept of the plan. So, look, on every single issue, Vice President Harris is standing on those issues with you and your family. It is clear Donald Trump has no plan for you. His agenda is about him. And the thing is, I will say this, while he didn't articulate it the other night, they've made it easy for us to know what they're going to do because they wrote it in a 900-page document called Project 2025. I keep asking this. Who is asking for that agenda? Who is asking for that agenda? Who is asking except folks that want to get control over your lives? That's the only people asking for it.
And by the way, while that...
So I think that's absolutely right. And he talked previously in that speech about how he was, or how Harris was, it's like wanting to get families back around the table, talking about what Harris can do for them, and just this idea of like proper politics and caring, empathetic politics as well. I don't think you're seeing that in the Trump campaign. Okay, just before we move on, this I think is interesting, especially for people who are concerned with the Ukraine war. Interesting to see the Harris campaign is doing this, presumably to appeal to Ukrainian Americans. Are they much of a voting bloc, says Chris Owicki. Actually, it's more than that. It's to appeal to Eastern European Americans, like Polish Americans, etc., etc. So the Harris campaign is running a series of ads
when Mongol warriors
in particularly, I think, the battleground states up the north, like the Great Lakes states, I think where they've got, this isn't just a nationwide thing. And there are risks associated with this, I think, because if you try and highlight the Ukraine war too much, I think that can get some of those MAGA voters pushing back, but possibly some of those swing ones in the middle, maybe, who are concerned about the spending of money and they don't understand how money is appropriated for things like military assistance to Ukraine and how that money works, like I've talked to you a million times about. But this is, I think, again, about chipping away some of those voters here and there to just get, if we can get some of those Polish American voters, some of those Ukrainian American voters over to our side, then we will win the election.
When Mongol warriors stormed Ukraine, Kyiv's church bells rang a night warning. They rang again when Ukrainians rallied for democracy. Today, they're warning the world of Putin's threat to freedom. Yet Donald Trump embraces Putin.
If I like Putin, he likes me.
He picked J.D. Vance.
I don't really care what happens to Ukraine.
But Kamala Harris cares. She knows standing up to Putin keeps America safe.
So there you go. That's one of them.
Centuries ago, as invaders...
Let's get another.
Centuries ago, as invaders marched from the east, a Polish watchman blew his trumpet to warn his people.
Polish.
Today, freedom-loving Poles and Ukrainians are warning us of a new threat. Donald Trump encouraged Putin to attack our allies.
No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want.
But Kamala Harris has heard the trumpet call. She will defend our brave allies for their freedom and for ours.
So what's going on here? data suggests that the best, most successful adverts are contrast adverts. So it's not just slagging off the opponent. It's not just saying how wonderful you are. It's saying this is them, this is us. Contrast, and you'll notice that this is what Trump likes, and this is what he wants. This is what Kamala Harris likes. Their freedom, our safety. But here also talking to Poles, so particularly aimed at the Polish
Mr.
Americans.
Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
And when one man is enslaved, all are not free.
American presidents, Republican and Democrat, have always defied Russia's communist dictators.
It's all about unity, about reaching across the aisle. Democrat, Republican, we're all in this together. This is for America. It's a big part of her campaign, and it's kind of summed up with adverts like this.
And defended American ideals. Kamala Harris gets this.
If we stand by while an aggressor invades its neighbor with impunity, they will keep going.
Kamala Harris will stand up to Putin, protect our allies, and keep us safe.
Mr. Gorbachev.
So then pulling it back to keeping us safe. So yeah, and for all of you other Americans, the reason why we're doing this is to keep us safe. So yeah, I think those are really effective adverts. I really like them. Right, now we're going to go on to talk about Laura Loomer. Who is Laura Loomer and what's going on there? So she has been massively associated with the Trump campaign, brought on board almost. She's on Trump's airplane. She's like hanging around. I think she's kind of whispering in Trump's ear quite a bit.
Trump is actually traveling with some of these folks, conspiracy peddlers. We should note a veritable legion of doom of bigots and liars, perhaps none so depraved as this woman, Laura Loomer. Here she is getting off of Trump's plane before yesterday's debate. Just on Sunday, she posted an insanely racist message that if Harris, whose mom was an Indian immigrant, wins, quote, the White House will smell like curry and White House speeches will be facilitated via a call center, unquote. On this 23rd anniversary of 9/11, we should also note Loomer posted last year that 9/11 was a, quote, inside job, unquote. Trump continues to bring this person along on his travels with him. Why? I don't know.
So he literally took her to the 9/11 commemoration, and she is a 9/11 denialist, as in she's a conspiracy theorist, not denying it happened, but saying it was an inside job done by the US. And there that should be an insult to the people who were there. So who is she? CNN did another little segment on her.
Official drink of America first.
This is far-right activist Laura Loomer and white nationalist Nick Fuentes cheering to
the hostile takeover of the Republican Party.
Absolutely.
Really great way to start this video. So Nick Fuentes is a far-right white extremist nationalist, right? He has had lunch with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, so that's who Donald Trump likes to hang out with sometimes. And here they are famously toasting to the hostile takeover of the Republican Party. That was what their toast was. And that is broadly what we have seen for the last 8 years and what we are seeing Loomer do at the moment.
And they're not wrong. Both met personally with Donald Trump. I first met Loomer in 2017 at an event for manosphere influencer Mike Cernovich. At the time, Loomer was an activist who'd celebrated the deaths of Muslim migrants. But she was being harassed by white nationalist trolls because she's a Jewish woman. Since then, she's taken a strange trajectory, with years somewhat in obscurity because she'd been banned from so many social media sites like Twitter. When Elon Musk took over Twitter, she came back. She does stunts like ambush interviews.
Frank, why aren't you supporting President Trump? I'm a successful investigative journalist.
Loomer recently told CNN she's not anti-Muslim. Now, some might dispute that she's entered the mainstream, but she's reached the former president's elite inner circle. Flying to the presidential debate on Trump's plane, and to New York as he observed the anniversary of 9/11.
There are some rumours going around at the moment because there's on camera quite a few instances where he's got her arm around her waist, and some people are saying she seems very close to Trump, and Trump seems to be estranged from his wife at the moment, who is nowhere to be seen on the campaign trail and has pretty much disowned him, at least as far as you can tell from body language and behaviour. And Laura Loomer appears to have stepped in, and some people are joining those dots now. I wouldn't speak to any of that myself, but just to let you know that it is out there and it's causing a bit of a stir.
A notable appearance since Loomer has pushed the false conspiracy theory that 9/11 was an inside job. She's been seen with Trump a lot.
We're here at Bedminster. I'm with the greatest president ever.
After rumors circulated among right-wing Twitter users, including Loomer, that Haitian immigrants are eating people's pets in Ohio, Trump repeated the claim in the debate.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in.
I spoke to Loomer before the debate. She told me she's attacked as a childless woman who devotes all her time to a man who will never pay attention to her, meaning Trump. But Trump does pay attention to her and reads her reports.
Laura, how are you? You look so beautiful, as always. You don't want to be Loomered. If you're Loomered, you're in deep trouble. Trump!
Good morning, everybody. My name is Laura Loomer.
She ran for Congress twice and lost. But she told me she built a constituency among the very pro-Trump voters in the Villages, a retirement community that's important in Florida Republican politics. She called them boomers for Loomer, and they were paying attention when she began attacking Governor Ron DeSantis for having the temerity to run for president against Trump.
Now, what's interesting recently is that she's had this spat, very public spat with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene is herself somewhat of a, you might say, a nationalist MAGA Republican herself. But Marjorie Taylor Greene called her out for that racist statement on the White House going to smell of curry because, you know, if Kamala Harris wins, etc., etc.
Republicans are very against her.
Her rhetoric and her tone does not match the base, does not match MAGA, does not match most Republicans I know, and I'm completely denouncing it. I'm over it.
There is a growing feud that is playing out in public today, and it's really exposing tensions between Donald Trump's allies. Far-right activist Laura Loomer was seen with Trump yesterday at events commemorating 9/11, despite the fact that she previously spread conspiracy theories about those very terrorist attacks.
Yeah, she posted on social media saying that it was an inside job.
So we're just going to go forward to this bit with Manu Raju, who talks about this spat in a little bit more detail.
And some of her rhetoric, but she says what Laura Loomer has been saying has been going too far. And she contends it does not represent the MAGA movement, does not represent former President Donald Trump. This in the aftermath of her racist post about Kamala Harris's Indian heritage. That was too much for Marjorie Taylor Greene, and then afterwards Loomer went to attack her on social media. So I asked her about this feud between those two, and this is what MTG said to me just moments.
So Marjorie Taylor Greene said, "This is an appalling, extremely racist. It does not represent who we are as Republicans or MAGA." And that's all correct. Like, I would agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene here. But you've got this infighting because Laura Loomer seems to have gone too far even for Marjorie Taylor Greene. It could be an idea of looking at that and saying, actually, practically, we're going to lose voters over this. But it seems quite problematic, I think, for Trump to win this election by looking to be unifying and to attract those centre voters and those swing voters and disaffected Democrats by courting effectively or having, you know, lending his ear to a far-right extremist. It's just absolutely insane. As Adam Kinzinger here says, care to weigh in on Laura Loomer at the 9/11 event or the eating of pets funness? Now, what he's saying here is that you know, the Laura Loomer issue is a real problem for the Republicans at the moment, and yet you've got people like Nikki Haley trotting out the usual kind of like, the economy and this or that, making comments about Kamala Harris, but not actually dealing with why the hell is Trump traveling around with a far-right extremist? Why the hell is he taking a 9/11 conspiracy theorist to a 9/11 commemoration? What the hell is going on with Trump talking about Haitians eating pets and having to be sent back to Venezuela? And Nikki Haley and others, just as an example, is silent on these very pressing issues that I think need to be addressed. So anyway, I wanted to mention Laura Loomer because she is a growing issue, I think, within the Republican framework. Right, hello again. That's, you won't notice, but that's about 6 hours of me being away from the computer and half a bottle of wine. So I hope I make a lot of sense, or at least some sense, in what I'm going to say. I'm going to recover some of the ground I covered in the last video with regard to what Trump is saying vis-a-vis the the Springfield Haitians. So let's go to Trump in another one of his. This is a speech he was making in California, I think at one of his golf clubs, saying how terrible California is, but his golf club is lovely.
I can say this, we will do large deportations from Springfield, Ohio. Large deportations. We're going to get these people out. We're bringing them back to Venezuela.
So he's talking about doing large deportations, but to remind you that the Haitians in Springfield are legal. They're not illegal immigrants, and they're not from Venezuela. So I have no idea why he's going to take them back to Venezuela. They've never gone, what? As Sam Stein says, Trump just pledged to do mass deportations from Springfield. The migrants there are there legally. They're Haitians. He said he'd deport them to Venezuela. I mean, what is going on there? So now let's go to another part of this this speech he made.
The mayor of Springfield, Ohio, the police chief, the Republican governor of Ohio have all debunked this story about people eating pets. And now there are bomb threats at schools and kids being evacuated. Why do you...
Okay, so just to give you some further context to this, as mentioned, I don't know if you heard, but the Republican governor, the police chief, etc., have debunked these stories about Haitians eating pets and geese, etc. There's a video, I think possibly the original video that started this off was some guy walking down the road with a goose in his hand, or it was a dead goose that had been hit by a car, and he's a black guy. He's not Haitian either. Like, completely incorrect there. And the goose had been hit by a car, and he was taking it. I think there's some article on it, and I don't know where he was taking it or whatever. But it's just everything about this story is wrong, and it has been debunked. There is also an awful lot of data to suggest his claims, and we'll very quickly go through this in a second. Data to show that his claims about criminality and either illegal or legal migration and migrants, that these two demographic segments do not correlate with higher criminality, so on and so forth. Everything's been debunked about what he says, and yet this is his reaction.
No. The real threat is what's happening at our border.
Okay. No. The real threat is what's happening at our border. So, arguably, the Haitians aren't what's happening at our border, although you could argue they've come through the border, and therefore that is a border problem. He's kind of smashing together all these ideas.
Because you have thousands of people being killed by illegal migrants coming in, and also...
And by the way, that's a massive call. You have thousands of people being killed. Right? This is... You have to substantiate that, because otherwise you can make anything up. If that's the benchmark that you're setting, if that's the example you are setting here, then any candidate running for president can just make stuff up. Says, if you vote for a Republican, you end up turning into a badger and immediately exploding. And so therefore you can't vote. I mean, this is what we know. I mean, this is true. So if you vote for a Republican, you will die through badger death. So you can't do that. You can't say that. That's nonsense. Okay, that's too ridiculous. People won't believe it. But to demonize immigrants and falsely claim that they are murdering thousands of people is insanely irresponsible. And yet, that is the kind of stuff that he's peddling.
Dying. You have women dying as they come up. They're coming up in large groups. We call it a caravan. I think I came up with that name.
You know what I said earlier about it's always about him. Everything's about him. He can't help but circle back to I'm amazing in some way. So here he's kind of like meandering about. He doesn't quite know what he's saying, but he does manage to he starts talking about women, and then he kind of loses the thread a little bit, and then just gets back to caravans of migrants. I mentioned that term before, and it's an amazing term, and I'm awesome for saying that.
As they come up, They're coming up in large groups. We call it a caravan. I think I came up with that name, but it's really what it is. 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 people.
And there you go. Just nothing he says appears to be justifiable, empirically, or even, I guess, morally as well. Okay. He keeps calling the migrants of Springfield illegal Haitians. They are here legally. They've not broken the law. He hates that they're here because they're not white, since this source.
And illegal Haitians, and he came in, illegal Haitian migrants taking over a beautiful place. It was so beautiful. Springfield, Ohio. I was there. I campaigned there a while ago. Springfield, it was so beautiful. Now it's just, what a place. Can you imagine you have this small little community, all of a sudden you have 20,000 illegals in your community. Nobody knows where they come from.
Haiti?
I'm angry about young American girls being raped and sodomized and murdered by savage criminal aliens.
And as I said in my previous video, this is the most egregious claim. It's horrific and it's completely unjustifiable.
And illegal.
That is so deeply irresponsible and incredibly divisive. So much so that the Haitian community is getting pretty angry about it.
Very disturbed by these comments because J.D. Vance, instead of retracting and apologizing, he's doubling down and changing his story and saying, oh, constituents are calling my office saying that they saw someone eat a dog or cat or ate Garfield. I don't think so. He's lying. I asked the media to reach out to Senator Vance and ask him for the records of his legislative office. We want to see what constituents are actually saying these lies. Reba, who works in my office, we record the phone number and name of every person that calls our office. That's what a legislative office is supposed to do. And so we're going to ask J.D. Vance, show us the proof. Because there is no proof. You're a liar. You're lying about such good people. That's un-Christian. How dare you? How dare you go to church? You don't deserve to be a senator. That's right. And I'm asking Elon Musk. I know you were in space today, but honestly, you act like a space cadet. How dare you double down on these lies and spread these fallacies and spread these lies through Twitter or X or whatever you call it? You're not even American. You're South African, and the allegations are that it was a South African who was taking the goose and the geese, or whatever, the duck. So these statements are completely false, and there's no way they could justify it or verify it. Thank you.
So a pretty angry Haitian activist there, annoyed that his community are being grossly misrepresented. I like this. Yeah, you might take issue with this, but I'm pretty sure none of these MFers are Haitian. Of course, you got all these January the 6th insurrectionists climbing up the Capitol, smearing feces on the walls as they did and smashing up parts of it and really desecrating the place. And yet they're okay. They're heroes. They're hostages, according to Donald Trump. But Haitians who have not done what he's claimed, they are rapists and sodomizers, and etc., etc. It's okay to demonize them, but turn these guys into heroes. Absolutely screwed. And I won't go through this in the detail I did in my last video, but the crime rate, and someone questioned this because they didn't quite understand, it's per 100,000. So these are proportions, or these are, sort of percentages, if you like. They're kind of a per capita statistic. So you can't add that to that and show that the immigrants have more than the US born citizens in terms of crimes and etc., etc. These are per 100,000. So the rate of violent crimes, the rate of property crimes, and the rate of drug violations is highest among US born citizens. So it doesn't matter how many there are. If you had 1,000, well, in fact, if you had 100,000 of these, then you would get over 200 crimes committed by US-born citizens. And if you had 100,000 legal immigrants, you would get fewer violent crimes. And if you had 100,000 undocumented immigrants, you would have fewer crimes. So, it's please understand how statistics work here. So this is Steve Ratner saying immigrants are less likely than US-born citizens to commit crimes, particularly undocumented ones. Trump's stories about migrant crime are clearly fiction. Here's a violent crime bar chart here, again from Steve Ratner. Violent crime has declined by 26% since Trump's last year in office, quite the opposite of crime going, quotes, through the roof, which is what he's claiming. Crime is actually dropping. And again, this gets back to the problem with allowing politicians to be able to outright lie to the public and get away with it. And so, is there a reason why he was fact-checked so many times in the ABC debate? Yes, because he was lying so often. He was, of course, going to be fact-checked more than Kamala Harris when he has this approach. Now, in the last video, I cited some research to show that, indeed, both legal and illegal migrants are less likely to commit crimes in the US, both on incarceration rates and criminality. There's a Brennan Center for Justice article that also looks at that. Just, go and watch my last video if you don't believe me, or indeed just go and research this. Just Google, are legal or illegal immigrants more or less likely to commit crimes than US-born citizens in the US? Something like that. Go and Google it, and you will find very easily a load of journals and articles to debunk the myth that Trump is perpetuating. And talking about killing cats in foreign countries, as I showed earlier, here we have a Trump family member going to a foreign country and killing a cat. So, I don't know. I'll leave that there. We have loads of fact-checking concerning what Trump has said in the debate and elsewhere. Here's again Steve Ratner showing that the proposed tariffs that Trump is supposedly going to implement right across the board will hit low earners the hardest, reducing after-tax incomes by 6.3% in the bottom quintile. And indeed, when JD Vance tried to support the idea that tariffs are a good idea, and he was called out, he said that economists disagree about whether tariffs lead to higher prices. So this week, the University of Chicago surveyed economists and asked them exactly this question. So, quote, imposing tariffs results in a substantial portion of the tariffs being borne by consumers by the country that enacts the tariffs through price increases. So in other words, if Trump is going to put tariffs on all goods imported into the country, who bears the cost of that? Is that a tax on the importers, or is it a tax on actually your own population? So the idea here is that, at least prima facie, without waiting 20 years to see whether your own manufacturers will start ramping up production of the things that are going to be imported to try and undercut the prices, but initially, at least, when all these entities are going to import or export from their countries into the US their goods, the US slaps on tariffs. So say a widget costs $10 and now it costs $100 because there's tariffs of $90. Who bears the cost of that $90? So it looks like, if you're not too with it, you say, well, it looks like the company that makes a widget that is exporting it is going to bear the cost of that $90 because you're slapping it on their good. But who pays for that? Your citizens, your companies, your domestic entities are paying $100 instead of $10. So who pays for that $90? It's not the exporter. It's your own country that's paying that. So essentially, tariffs are a tax on your own country. You end up paying that. And essentially, all the economists either strongly agreed, 43% with that idea, 52% agreed 2% were uncertain, and 2%, which represent, by the way, one person, so there are 50 people asked here, 2% disagree. And the one economist who disagreed appeared to understand the question as asking about a tariff on one country rather than all countries, as opposed which is what Trump is proposing. So they were saying, right, if you're going to whack tariffs on one country and they import that, who's that going to hit? But of course, that means that you can just buy from elsewhere much more easily. So it's going to hit that country more. But if you're slapping tariffs on everyone, then your own country is just simply going to be paying for just a lot higher prices for imports in general. Anyway, Trump was a net oil importer, but the US became a net oil exporter under Biden for the first time in over 70 years. So this was another sort of claim. He's like, drill, baby, drill. Well, actually, the US is now drilling more oil out of the ground than any other country in the history of the Earth. In the history of Earth. And that needs to be recognized, because Trump is trying to say, the implication is we're not drilling enough. Well, actually, you're drilling record amounts at the moment, and you can look at this and see that the US has become energy independent and is now exporting, is not a net importer. So that's an incredibly important corrective for the Trump claims. Now, what is a real worry is that a number, and Trump has, I think, been asked this question, I think JD Vance has, but here we have Senator Mark Wayne Mullin answering this question in typical MAGA ways.
Attorney General Merrick Garland spoke about the threats against the Justice Department and election officials and what they are facing going into this election. He just launched this election threats task force. Last election, you were one of the lawmakers who voted to not certify Biden's victory. If Trump loses and every state certifies the results of their election, will you accept a peaceful transfer of power?
It's hard to say what you're going to do and what you're not, because my job is to make sure their irregularities are within the standard that the federal government puts out place, which is us. What is the irregularities that we're willing to accept? If it's past those irregularities in a district or a state, then absolutely not. If it's within those standards, then we will.
So if every state certifies the election results, so they have their own processes in place.
If the elections are certified underneath the standards that they put forth, every state has the right to set their, because every state sets their own state election laws, right? But the federal government sets the irregularities as to how far those can go. So is it going to be less than 1%? Is it less than 0.5%? Whatever those irregularities are, we'll take that case at a time.
What this Oklahoma senator is doing is essentially casting aspersions on the democratic system and mechanisms within the US. Is really sort of muddying the waters. And this is dangerous. You are starting to see, and polls reflect this, a growing suspicion about and a growing lack of trust of the democratic process in the US. It's incredibly worrying. If Trump loses and every state certifies the result, will you accept the peaceful transfer of power? So if Trump loses and every state certifies the result, will you accept the peaceful transfer of power? It's hard to say. What the Trump campaign is doing is laying the groundwork to challenge the result, no matter what the result. Well, if the result isn't Trump wins, then it will be challenged. It just will be challenged. You could potentially have violence. Look at January the 6th. Last time, you are potentially seeing a thorough degradation of democracy in the US, and not because it has been degraded, but because people are messing around with the perceptions of that degradation. You've got senators and you've got Trump and his team pouring scorn over the process and questioning that results will be justifiable. And this has led to a position that by default, if the Democrats win, it has to be because they cheated. You have a certain number of voters who believe that it is basically physically impossible for the Democrats to fairly win an election. That's incredibly dangerous. Now, we had Taylor Swift endorsing, so moving on to a next nugget. Taylor Swift endorsed Kamala Harris shortly after the debate. And then she also urged people to register to vote in that endorsement and at the MTV VMA, the awards, Video Music Awards. Now, this incurred a whole range of critical reactions from Fox News representatives and other MAGA, and also people like Megyn Kelly was insulted when she was moderating a debate for Trump way back when, wasn't she? And she seems to have come back round and is kissing the ring of Trump again. It's incredible. So anyway, lots of people have gone from saying nobody cares about Taylor Swift and about who she endorses, or Taylor Swift is no one, or I prefer other singers, like Donald Trump has said. He's announced that he likes another American footballer, actually her friend, who is a singer. He prefers her because he had liked something he had said on Twitter or Truth Social or something like that. Is that pathetic, really? But anyway, like, people are dismissing Taylor Swift, or saying she's not kind of entitled to political opinions. You got people like Jeanine Pirro just slagging Taylor Swift off for how you stick to your singing, a bit like, stick to your sport. What was it that Laura Ingraham said about, just stick to dribbling, or whatever it is, about basketball players that have political opinions? Like, essentially, for many people, it's like you are not entitled to a political opinion unless you are a politician or a journalist. No one else is entitled to a political opinion unless it aligns with what I believe. Then you're fine, and I'll in fact amplify that. But if it's anyone else that says anything against Trump, then you're not entitled to that opinion. And this is basically Megyn Kelly's approach.
I'm allowed to criticize Taylor Swift, and I don't give a who gets upset. This is disgusting. If she wants to vote Harris Walsh.
Why is it disgusting? Like, why is someone saying, I would like to vote for this person? And by the way, what Taylor Swift said was really good, because she didn't urge her supporters to go and vote for Kamala Harris. She didn't. She said, I'm endorsing Kamala Harris. I want you to go out and register to vote and go and do your own research as to who you think should be the next president. But I'm endorsing Harris because I think she and Tim Walz are strong on these topics. Now that is responsible. So I want you to be enfranchised. I want you to be empowered to vote. So go and register, do your research, and vote for who you think is best. This is who I'm voting for and why. But that apparently is so egregious that Megyn Kelly, in some obsequious, fawning Trump adulation, says that's just outrageous.
I'm allowed to criticize Taylor Swift, and I don't give a who gets upset. This is disgusting.
It's not disgusting.
If she wants to vote Harris Walsh, she can do it all she wants. But to say the reason she's doing it is because of Tim Walz's stance on LGBTQ, F you, Taylor Swift, and F all of the people.
Why is that not acceptable? Why, if she chooses to support Kamala Harris on a topic, why is that unacceptable for Taylor Swift? Yet if someone like Kid Rock came out and said, I'm voting for Trump because he's strong on immigration, that's fine. So it's okay for some other person to choose to vote for Trump based on broadly one area of policy. But when Taylor Swift says that, F you. That's disgusting. I'll tell you what's disgusting, Megyn Kelly. It's your outburst.
On LGBTQ, F you, Taylor Swift, and F all of the people who want to see these children have body parts chopped off and watch them sterilized under the age of consent. And
now she's just going off on one, and a typical Trump disinformation splurge.
Right off to their multi-gazillion-dollar mansions, never to think of them again. I'm allowed to criticize Taylor.
Jesus. And you go, she's a high information voter, right? She's someone that is a journalist, a reporter, a news anchor, etc., etc. She seemed to have circled right back round to the MAGA cult. Here we have a Trump supporter who's a low information voter. And the reason I say he's a low information voter is because his information is very, very poorly understood.
Barack Obama had big part of 9/11.
Which part?
Not being around, always on vacation, never in the office.
Why?
So, Barack Obama was always on vacation, never in the office at 9/11. Where was he at 9/11? Where was Barack Obama in World War II? Where was he? Actually, World War What? No. Where was Barack Obama during the Civil War? God damn it, Barack Obama was on holiday, or he was sleeping, or he was not alive because he wasn't born. Oh, yeah.
And always on vacation, never in the office.
Why do you think Barack Obama wasn't in the Oval Office on 9/11?
That I don't know. Would like to get to the bottom of that. Barack Obama.
I'd like to get to the bottom of that. Oh, yeah, he wasn't president. Oh, that was it. Yeah, no. Ugh. Anywho, now, going back to talk about campaigns, like one thing that is going to be necessary for both nominees to do, I think, is to really flesh out what their policies are. And one of the big topics is the economy. And one of the accepted opinions, it seems, is that the Republicans have got an awful lot of ammunition to fire against the Democrats in terms of the economy. But the reality is the American economy is one of the best performing economies in the world compared to all other similar economies. They have bounced back from recession, the best they have, from COVID, the best they have, a really low inflation compared to what they did have. And although people perceive there to be high inflation, in reality the inflation is low, and mean wage rates have risen above inflation for something like 13-14 months in a row. So the reality is far different to what people think. However, the Republicans think that this is one of the main areas that they can hammer the Democrats. What Kamala Harris needs to do, and it's difficult because on the one hand, and we saw this in the debate where she said, I am not Joe Biden, so don't attach all of Joe Biden to me. I'm my own person. I'm not Donald Trump. I'm not Joe Biden. I'm a new way. But on the other hand, she also wants to, so the job is to try and distance yourself from all the bad parts of the Biden administration for the last 4 years, but actually celebrate the good parts, because I was responsible for that, but not responsible for that. That's quite difficult, isn't it? But actually, I wouldn't say there are too many wholly negative parts, because some of the major negative ones are problems with perception rather than reality. And the economy is a really good example of this. So the economy in the US is, as I say, doing really well. And another area they're doing really well in, and this is arguably due to the economic policies of the Biden administration, which is the CHIPS Act, the Infrastructure Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, all these things that have actually put the framework in place for a thriving economy are now bearing that fruit. So if you just put in manufacturing boom, US manufacturing boom into Google, in this case Bing, unpacking the boom in US construction and manufacturing facilities, America is a factory boom again. We have a new age of US manufacturing has begun in California. American is building factories again. Why US manufacturing commitments double after Biden did X, Y, and Z. Manufacturing month, how Biden's big investments spurred a factory boom. Transformational change, Biden's industrial policy. Construction manufacturing boom, mapping the biggest, blah, blah, blah. Amidst a manufacturing boom, President Biden, blah, blah, blah. The future of US manufacturing is hiding in plain sight. Factory boom sweeps US with construction at record levels. Okay, so actually manufacturing is at record levels and there's a factory boom. That needs to be solved. I mean, if you just go, there's a really good video by Good Times, Bad Times, who do really nice, fairly slick videos looking at different. I mean, I've used them a few times for some really good information on the Ukraine war, actually. Here's one on what has taken place economically over the last 4 years plus.
Effects of US protectionism and the start of the reindustrialization battle will only begin to be felt by both China and Europe. For example, take the Build America, Buy America Act, enacted on November 15, 2021, as a component of the previously mentioned infrastructure future. This was explained by the troubles.
I have no idea why that just went back a bit there, but thanks for that, YouTube.
Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The law, commonly referred to as Buy American, mandates, among other things, that any product purchased by the federal government must consist of 65% US-made components, with this threshold being raised to 75% in 2029.
So what the Biden administration has done over the last 4 years, and actually Trump did this a little bit as well. Trump is quite an isolationist, but in isolationism, so what you have in economic terms is you have a lot of people that are free marketeers who believe in tiny government, small government, and this is the conservative Republican platform, is small government, no regulation, free markets. Trump is advocating for putting tariffs on everything, which is the exact opposite of a free market. Free market is you let the market decide prices and you do not interfere with the market from a regulatory, tax, governmental, strategic planning point of view. You just let it get on with its stuff. You have minimal interaction. So that's what free marketeers want. And that's not what Trump wants. So Trump is not a free marketeer. He wants protectionism and a lot of government intervention in terms of tariffs. Tariffs are a form of protectionism where you're protecting your industries. So in the Industrial Revolution, Britain was seen by many free marketeers as like the paragon of the free market. But a really good book to look into this. There's a book by Ha-Joon Chang, who's an economist, called 23 Things About Capitalism You Didn't Know, or something like that. Really good look at how you think these elements of economic history were pure free market capitalism, but they weren't at all. And one of them is the Industrial Revolution, whereby it looks like the free market was how UK spearheaded economic transformation with the Industrial Revolution. But actually, it was an awful lot of infant industry protectionism. So we had these new industries. We put tariffs on, say, we were making loads of textiles, and we also had India as part of the British Empire, and we were putting massive tariffs on Indian textiles so that it would protect our industry, so that our industries could flourish. And then we took full advantage of that, and then the free market kind of takes over. But many people look at that and say the whole thing was a free market, but actually it wasn't. It was loads of strategic planning that took place from central government. And I'm someone that sits in the economic centre, so I believe in a kind of mixed economic approach, like the good old mixed government, mixed markets of British governments in years gone past, where you have the free market with some sensible government strategic planning and regulation. And actually, what Trump wants to do is kind of that to some degree. So protectionism, I'm not against protectionism at all. It's just how far you take it. So slapping tariffs on everything that you're importing is not a good idea. But being sensible like this, so this is a clever sort of thing that Biden has done, saying, right, everything that the federal government buys needs to be like 65% made in the US, or have components, 65% of the components need to come from the US. And what you're doing is you're regulating purchasing and procurement in a way that stimulates your own economy. So you then start getting manufacturing booming in your country. And that's exactly what this video talks to.
With this threshold being raised to 75% in 2029. The same is true for investment subsidies. Thus, if the Broadband Equity, Access and Deployment Program plans to spend $42 billion to expand an ultra-high-speed broadband internet network in the US, all sorts of technical equipment for it will have to be manufactured in the US. and ultimately consist of 75% components also made on US soil.
And this is a kind of sensible strategic kind of planning rather than I'm going to slap a tariff on anything that is imported into the US, which is kind of just naive. You need to just be a bit more thoughtful.
The same is true for electric cars, wind turbines, photovoltaic panels, batteries, etc. The Biden administration has offered a broad package of support for investments related to the production of equipment critical to the great energy transition.
My question then is, how many people know this? Like, does the general population in the US, do you know this? Do you Americans watching this know what the Biden administration has done in the last 4 years to stimulate the US economy and to stimulate a manufacturing boom? Do you know what they've done? So part of being in government is to sell to the people what you are going to do, but what you have done. And for Harris as a nominee, a presidential nominee, she needs to sell her successes that she has done, and then also sell this vision of the future to the electorate, so they know she's got good priors and she can take that good form and take us into a future that is attractive.
Shift away from fossil fuels, but in return it requires their Americanization. Thus, according to the standard already in place, no less than 40% of the components of a battery manufactured in the US must be made from components also made in the US. But in 2026, this threshold will automatically rise to 80% already. Investors went for it, and as the White House boasts in its announcement, quote, "Since President Biden and Vice President Harris took office, companies have announced more than $250 billion in investments in US clean energy and electric vehicle manufacturing." Meanwhile, the package still includes $20 billion in grants, for example, to upgrade and expand port infrastructure in the US. But only companies operating in America and using American machinery can take part in this program. For this reason, the Japanese conglomerate Mitsui, which specializes in such investments, and its US subsidiary, Pakeco, have decided to move production of port cranes to American soil. After a 30-year hiatus, these specialized devices will again be manufactured in the United States. The Department of Homeland Security also played its role here. At the beginning of 2024, presidential executive directives were released. 2 new regulations prepared by the said department. They concerned the security of ships, ports, and waterfront facilities, as well as cybersecurity in these areas. After the regulations went into effect, port equipment manufactured in China, including primarily cranes, proved to be a threat to US national security.
And I don't even remember, I reported on this in my Ukraine war update videos. And this is all part of building a thriving economy where you can say, right, due to cybersecurity issues and due to the notion that these cranes can be used for nefarious ends, these Chinese cranes, we are going to say you can't do that, and actually that means we're going to build these cranes in the US, and look, these crane manufacturers are now setting up shop in the US, and etc., etc. And this is causing a boom in the manufacturing industry, or adding to that boom. And have they successfully sold this? Do people know about it? What is Harris doing to tell people about this on the campaign trail? You don't want to bore people. You need to somehow encapsulate this in pithy, kind of memorable statements, etc., etc.
So the only thing left for Mitsui is to relocate its plants to the United States. Yet the Japanese should not complain, having eliminated Chinese competitors. Such examples of how the Americans have started to play hardball continue to abound. Spending $3 billion in federal funds on high-speed rail projects will follow exactly the same rules. So will subsidizing the expansion of 40 charger plants for electric cars, and then supporting the development of charger networks across the US.
So what happens though, people go, oh, this is some environmental policy, oh, we're dead against this, blah blah blah, and you get people like Jim Jordan in Congress having a go at Pete Buttigieg, and Pete Buttigieg putting him in his place, like absolutely schooling him. This is all part of not just an environmental strategy, this is future-proofing the United States, but also putting in place that 60%, 80%, 40%, whatever it is, of the components of all these things that you are saying have to be built, have to be US. The components need to be manufactured in the US. And therefore, all of this regulation is a form of stimulating the US economy, which is a way to generate jobs, which is a way to generate tax income, which is a way to be able to fund welfare programs and education and hospitals and even the war in Ukraine, etc., etc. So it is, I think, incumbent upon the incumbent administration to communicate this to the electorate. Do they know enough about this? I don't think so. Anyway, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too much more, but you get the point. Let's go and talk very quickly about certain polls. Things are changing in terms of, here's some Fox rating changes, which I think is interesting because Fox polls are actually pretty decent. They're not partisan. They use pretty good methodology, and they work in conjunction with, I forget which polling organization it is that underwrites the Fox News polls. But anyway, Georgia has gone from lean Republican to a toss-up. North Carolina has gone from lean Republican to a toss-up. That's incredibly important. If you start seeing some of these, like Georgia and North Carolina, if they start moving towards being possibly won by the Democrats, then Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin will be won by the Democrats, and Arizona and Nevada will probably follow suit. So if these are looking, I mean, you've got Texas within 3% in some polls at the moment. You've got a Florida senator within 3%, I think, of Tim Scott there. There are some really significant moves in certain places that could be looking good. Now, one of the issues for the Democrats is registration. Some of the registration numbers have been looking pretty dodgy. So August has Republicans registering at 141,796 against 61,042. Now that's post Joe Biden switching over to Kamala Harris. So what is going on there? Now there are many people that throw caveats on this, and it's really important that you do get caveats, because it's very easy to look at headlines like this and go, holy crap, the Republicans are doing much better at registering, and therefore they are going to get a higher vote come November. But the context that is conveniently left out is that this data doesn't include most of the largest blue states like California, New York, and Illinois. Important context: states that are still taking voters off of voter rolls, sometimes GOP secretaries of state, have as like their number one priority in office. From here on out, Dems won't be fighting upstream on this, as all changes will be new registrations, then so on and so forth. There are so many caveats. It's really interesting reading the threads below this. Lots of people saying, yeah, this is brilliant for the Republicans, and other people going, hang on, these are really pretty dodgy numbers and they don't represent the full scale of what's going on. And actually, I'm going to bring in now your man here, which is what's his name, Tom Bonia here, who talks about registration numbers since the Biden switcheroo.
To Simon's point, the polls are going to tell us that the race is close, and as Simon says, from the perspective of the poll averages, we're likely leading by a little bit. And so the big question becomes, it's trite, but what is turnout going to look like? That's always the question, but I think it's even more important this time around. We have to keep in mind, and I'll just repeat this ad nauseum because I see people making this mistake on a daily basis. The polls don't tell us who is going to vote. The polls are based on the pollster's assumption of who is going to vote. New York Times poll that everyone was freaking out about a few days ago that showed a 1-point race said the electorate is going to be +3 Republican, right? I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying we can add context. And to your point, David, about the type of analysis that Simon and I and others have been doing, especially going back to 2022. And I think why we all had that confidence to go in and say this isn't going to be a red wave election is
that was the midterm election was not in 2022 was not the red wave it's supposed to be. It was like a red trickle. It was really underwhelming, and actually the Democrats did a hell of a lot better than people were expecting.
Relying on this additional data to say, okay, well, what do we think turnout is going to look like? What do these indicators look like? Voter registration was incredibly helpful in 2022 because we saw after Dobbs that surge in registration, especially among women, younger voters, and voters of color.
So Dobbs is the repeal of the Roe versus Wade and giving the states the right to dictate to their own citizens abortion access, etc., etc. And that was incredibly controversial and led to a massive upsurge in registration, particularly of women voters. As he said, women, people of colour, people that were going to be more affected by these rulings and the repeal of Roe versus Wade. That was a huge registration and drove a lot of the midterm election voting in favour of Democrats. So what could they learn from that?
Especially in the states where we ended up overperforming. Places like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Nevada. So we know that for the first half of this year, voter registration didn't look great for Democrats. We were seeing an underperformance. We were seeing a lack of intensity and enthusiasm among the Democratic base. What our team did is we looked at immediately after July 21, after President Biden withdrew from the race and endorsed Vice President Harris, just to see, well, what's that impact? Just like we did 2 years ago, right after June 24th and the Dobbs decision, to see who's registering to vote. Because that's much more important than, as you say, these sort of Nate Silver market, the betting market analysis. This is people actually going out and saying, I need to make sure that I'm eligible to vote in this election. And what we saw was a complete turnaround. And I can't emphasize this strongly enough. I was amazed by what we saw after Dobbs. Seeing in places like Kansas, 40-point gender gaps in registration. Women under the age of 25 voting at a higher rate than all men in an August primary election in Kansas. What we've seen in the period immediately following the candidate change has, in almost every state, exceeded the numbers we saw post-Dobbs. And in terms of...
So in other words, he is saying that the research they have done, and he runs a research organization, the research they have found has shown that post-Dobbs was amazing. Like after the repeal of Roe versus Wade, registration was insane in favor of the Democrats. And he is saying that since the switcheroo with Biden, we have seen registration that far outstrips that Dobbs spike.
Of a comparison to 4 years earlier, to that same point in the 2020 cycle, we're seeing, in a lot of cases, a tripling, if not more, of registration rates among young women of color, especially young Black women, young Hispanic women, broadly young voters overall, women overall. It's the same groups, right? It's the same groups that fueled the Democratic overperformance in 2022 are even more intense right now in this election. And so I think that's huge. The last point I'll add, if I can throw in one sort of breaking news number, is, just like everyone else, we watch the debate, we see the excitement and enthusiasm, and then we wonder, are we in our own echo chamber here? Like, is this really resonating elsewhere the way that we feel like it is? And so we look for numbers. That's why I looked at those registration numbers when people were calling Vice President Harris's campaign launch a sugar high, as if it's something that would just go away. So our team has a database, basically voter registration systems hit against our voter file to check people who want to register to vote. We work with groups like vote.org and others. And we've got a really cool chart on this on Twitter. It actually shows during the debate, we saw a quadrupling of voter registration checks on our system. And then when Taylor Swift posted what she posted on Instagram and encouraging people to register to vote, it went up even higher. So that intensity and enthusiasm, excitement, maybe a sugar high in some ways is apt, but that sugar high is producing measurable market gains. What we know is if you register to vote in the lead up to election, you have an 85% probability of voting in that election. So these are
that's huge. So if you're seeing hundreds of thousands of people register to vote, then you are seeing hundreds of thousands of people that are going to vote. You are going to transform those people registered to actual votes.
These are real voters who are likely to vote in this election, who frankly weren't engaged before, and to the extent that President Biden was trailing in the polls back in July, these were the voters who we needed back.
Really interesting there. And other points of interest that could well be reflective. So Alaska has just had a poll. Now, Alaska has not voted Democrat since 1964 or whatever it was. You had a really interesting situation where, was it Mary Poltava? Is that her name? She was indigenous Inuit, I think. I don't know if that's the correct term, up in Alaska. And she won on a ranked choice voting system and beat Sarah Palin, who was trying to get in again up there. And that was a real shock. And you've seen this move towards it being Democrat. And so the latest poll has the Democrats within 5 of, I think, the Republicans with the most accurate Alaska polling polling statistics. It's a really accurate pollster that's done that, and they are like super close comparatively compared to where they used to be, like massively closer, the Democrats. And if that is reflective of a general trend in, this is a real like Republican stronghold that is becoming more and more democratic as the years go by, then that's a really interesting indicator. So the Alaska polls are worth looking into. Check out Let's Talk Elections video on that one. And also, I showed you this Wisconsin video information that I thought was absolutely fascinating earlier on today. And I said there are some really key points in this. And it was the effect that... this is post-debate, but the people in Wisconsin who are moving away from Republican vote and independents who are moving away from leaning Republican to Democrat in a really significant way. So we saw that Democrats were consolidating their vote, 98 and 99% in party ID Democrats. So Democrats who are ID as Democrats who lean as partisans or lean as independents. So I'm a Democrat, I'm registered as a Democrat and I lean Democrat in my voting, or I'm registered as a Democrat but I actually lean independent. So both those categories, 99% and 98% of Democrats are going to vote Harris. So that you're only losing 1 or 2% to voting actually not Trump. None of them voting Trump. It seems like they're voting other. But with the Republicans, you've got 92 and 91%, with 3% of the Republicans voting for Harris in both those categories, and 5 and 6% in both those categories voting for a third party or voting differently. And with the independents, you've got 50 and 53% with Harris and 38 and 25% with Trump. And so in Wisconsin, I always talk to you about making sure that you consolidate your own base. So the Democrats have done that. They've proper consolidated 99 and 98%. You consolidate your own base, you look at the independents and you try and steal them. So Harris has stolen in Wisconsin. She's got 50 to 38 independents and 53 to 25. Job done. And then you look at Republicans, and actually a meaningful amount of Republicans are moving away from the Trump vote there. And that is, I think, really important. There's some more stats that looked at people who rated themselves as moderate as well. Here we go. In fact, let's listen to this part from him.
Maybe a little bit in Milwaukee and stuff, but the overall scheme of things within the state, not really. Now, if we look at the way people identify as far as ideology, this is one of the groups I said that Kamala Harris needs a target. As you can see, the largest number are moderate voters at 247 of the sample. Those are
in other words, a whole group of voters who were surveyed in Wisconsin, most of them self-identify as moderates, ideologically speaking.
breaking 59 to 28. This, I think, is going to, at the end of the day, this is going to be the key.
And absolutely right. This is the key. Why is it the key? Because as we've talked about before, Harris is trying to be the unifier that says, I have a gun, Tim Walz has a gun. We have Republicans who spoke at the DNC and who are advocating for us. We've got Dick Cheney, Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, Jeff Duncan, etc., you know, Esper and all these other people that are not voting for Trump and are endorsing Harris. We are trying to be a unifying moderate party now. That's the agenda we're going for, because that's what gets us voted in. Is that what gets us voted in? Well, let's look at the Wisconsin poll, and 59% of moderates say they're going to vote Harris, and 28% say they're going to vote Trump, and 13% say they're going to vote neither. That is huge. And as he says, that tells you all you need to know.
What Kamala Harris has done, and she has done masterfully, extremely masterfully, and Barack Obama did it back in 2008, is to have a message that appeals to the left and the center. So it's like, it's not even like center left, it's left and center, and she's doing a really good job. And I think this is going to be the death knell for the Republicans, because they're not going to be able to penetrate that center. 28% of moderates going for Donald Trump, with 59% going for Kamala Harris. That is huge. And that's not a trend. After seeing the debate, that is not a trend that surprises me whatsoever. All right, so now let's go ahead and look.
Interesting. So then we're going to join him at the towards the end of this.
We see
if it's doing going to do what it says. And this is, I find this a really interesting set of stats here. I won't go on the corruption bit, but basically many more people see Donald Trump as corrupt. The point of interest is sharing values. So although we talk about ideology, and although I'm talking about economy and this and that, the reality is most people in this election, I talked about this with regard to weeding out Trump and him being vacuous from ideology, and he's actually just talking about these simple ideas, immigration, demonizing immigrants, and this. It's the vibes you get off that. It's not the detail of the policy and it making particular sense. It's like the vibes I get are either like with Harris, it's like she's really positive and unifying. With Trump, he's like anti-immigrants and America first. Those kind of vibes, are they important? Well, it turns out that it appears statistically that they are more important than the granular detail.
As we can see with shares values, Donald Trump is only at 45%. So we see that the number that he has in the polls, he's not even getting those 100% of those who identify as Donald Trump sharing their values. So he's down, he's down 2% compared to what this number is. And that number is huge. Now, if we look at corrupt,
so I probably actually need to go back there. Let's go back to this.
That is way more important than any of these issues. Let's go ahead and go to that crosstab. So let's look at this one. Shares my values. This is the one that really matters the most. 51% of people in Wisconsin say that Kamala Harris either shares their values very well or somewhat well, with 32% saying very well. This is important. Now, if we look at corrupt as well, we see only 38% of people in Wisconsin think that Kamala Harris is corrupt. Now, let's go ahead and look at the Donald Trump numbers on this. As we can see with shares values, Donald Trump is only at 45%. So we see that the number that he has in the polls, he's not even getting those 100% of those who identify as Donald Trump sharing their values. So he's down, he's down 2% compared to what this number is. And that number is huge. Now, if we look at corrupt, do you think that Donald Trump is corrupt? 62% of people in Wisconsin say, yes, this statement is true.
In other words, a large number of people who are voting for Donald Trump think he is corrupt.
Really does describe, with 47% saying this describes Donald Trump very well. This is what the issue is. This is what the election is about. Everybody is focusing on, oh, well, what about the economy and this and Donald Trump? Integrity, values, whether you're corrupt or not. These are the things that matter. If you sell yourself like this, and I know a lot of Republicans are like, well, you know, Kamala Harris, she hasn't been talking about the issues and all. She don't need to talk about the issues because voters don't talk about, voters don't vote on the issues. I'm sorry. That's just like a fact.
This may sound controversial, but I think he's right here. So the high information voters, the people on these news channels that spend their days talking about this all the time are saying she needs to talk more about the economy and she needs to, and I've said that already earlier on in this video. But the statistics possibly indicate that actually she doesn't really need to. She needs to give the vibes because people are driven across society. So some people are really driven by the detail and the policy, but in large part, low information voters particularly, and that's most of the population, are more interested in vibes.
Go back to Campbell, Converse, Miller, and Stokes, the American voter, back in the 1950s and 60s. Look at their research, and all the research that's gone after that. People look at if somebody maybe does an overall good job, usually with the economy, maybe does a reward and punishment type of system with retrospective voting. Maybe they, in this case, are doing prospective voting as far as what they see Kamala Harris as doing in this election. But overall, you need to trust a person. You need to feel that they share your values and everything. People consider, and if it's at 62% saying that Donald Trump is corrupt, that means a lot of his people are like, yeah, I'm voting for him, but I know he's corrupt. Okay, which is a sad state for democracy in this country. But overall, this poll looks really, really good. The crosstabs are where they need to be. The crosstabs are saying exactly what we expect. And when we delve into these numbers about if they share your values, if they're corrupt or whatever, we see that Kamala Harris looks a lot stronger. People want to vote for a candidate that they like, that they trust, that they feel is honest with them, that's going to say it like it is. That's what elections are. And for years, and it really took until 2008 and then rehashed it again in 2024. For years, Democrats were in this wonky issue-based campaign. Ask John Kerry and other people how that worked. It doesn't, and ask Hillary Clinton. You need to have, it's a popularity contest at the end of the day. It's a popularity contest. As much as people don't want to hear that, it is a popularity contest. And if you want Kamala Harris to win, you got to make sure that you are registered to vote, that you do go out there and vote. Please, people in the comments who have been making those comments.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why the registering is also so important. Now, I think I've got this in the right place. Let me just check that I have. Yeah, it is. And this is talking about the stats regarding... I think these are the ones regarding the debate and how people felt about that.
I'm going blue. So let's go look at the next crosstab that just blew my mind when I saw it. Now, it's that same crosstab I talked about before, but it's of voters who make under $50,000 a year. Let's look at this. So if you look at before the debate, only 36% of Americans or registered voters in this poll thought that Kamala Harris was best to understand the problems of people, with Donald Trump being 43%. That number flipped and actually expanded a little. But Kamala Harris now being at 46% and Donald Trump at 34%.
So he's already done most of the video on the CNN poll. So you heard the top line figures, which were after you had a 50% and 50% before the debate in this poll sample thought that Kamala Harris is going to win the debate. 50% thought that Trump was going to win. Actually, the survey, the sample skewed Republican as well, which is interesting when you look at the metadata, etc., etc. And he talks about that, but he says the most significant part of this for him was that the low income people, low income is probably the wrong word, actually. Moderate income, I don't know, American dollars, Anyway, people under 50,000, which is traditionally, your working class, that has skewed more and more to the Republicans and Trump recently, even though, like in times gone past, you'd have union workers skewing towards the Democrats. That's kind of changed a lot. Trump's been much more popular with this demographic. The before and after the debate, in terms of, who they thought won the debate and who they favoured, skewed much more towards Harris in this group.
This can change everything because Donald Trump relies a lot on lower income voters. And if all of a sudden this debate made it that they're noticing that there is this change and they're saying, I like what Kamala Harris says. This can be earth-shattering. This can be earth-moving. This can change everything in the election. The question is, can they make this become votes?
Always
this is the problem the Democrats have, and they always have. They can start all of a sudden winning these metrics, but then at the end of the day, these people don't vote, or they still vote for Donald Trump because he's going out there talking about how people are eating dogs and cats and pets, right? So in this poll, this number right here, the Democrats now have the advantage. Look at what you did in the debate. Take those ideas, run with them, because if all of a sudden you're bringing down margins in places where incomes are $50,000 and lower, you are taking a huge chunk out of Donald Trump's votes. A huge chunk. This can be earth-shattering for the Democrats. Hopefully they can change it into votes. We'll see, but hopefully that's the case. All right, so let's look at the Ipsos poll real quick. So
and this is where we're going to leave it. I'm not going to leave it here, as in we're going to listen to this part because I think it's really, really revealing. This is another poll concerning the opinions about the debate.
We have the first question, made me more hopeful about the future, and we're only going to look at registered voters. I don't care about the total number of adults. If you're not a registered voter, you can't vote in this election anyways, unless you go register, and the chances of you doing that are probably highly unlikely. Anyway, Kamala Harris, 45% of registered voters about having more hope in the future. Now, if we look at gave the impression of having higher moral integrity, Kamala Harris at 50% with Donald Trump at 29%. That's pretty bad for Trump. Now, the next question seemed like someone who would listen to me and understand my concerns. Again, and we mentioned this in the CNN poll earlier, Kamala Harris dominating that group. Independents dominating that group as well. Very, very strong for Kamala Harris. And another thing too in this that I think is really interesting, when they say seem like would listen to me and understand my concern, 22% of Republicans say none. I don't think either one of them would do. That's a cop-out because they don't.
So I'm going to translate what he's saying to some degree here. And this happens a lot on a number of the questions in this Ipsos Mori poll, which is, the question is, which of these candidates seems like someone that would listen to me and understand my concerns, or someone I want to have a casual conversation with. And Harris has come out comes out much better in these results. But what's really interesting is that a lot of Donald Trump voters vote in a way that allows them to get out of having to admit that they would vote for Harris. And so the numbers look like they say none, neither of the candidates, but they are Donald Trump. So they're Republicans that say, which candidate would you most like to have a conversation with? Well, neither of them. In other words, I'm not going to vote for Trump, but I can't vote for Harris in this. So I'm just going to cop out by saying none of them. I don't think either of them would listen to me or understand my concerns, and I wouldn't want to have a casual conversation with either of them. But that is basically a cop out from predominantly Republicans here.
I don't want to say Kamala Harris are a Republican, okay? So they just like saying, I don't think either one of them would. that is a pure cop-out, because like if you look at Democrats, it's only 9%, right? So that's starting to show a little bit of a chink in the armor for the Republicans, maybe. Let's keep going. Seem more like someone I would want to have a casual conversation with. Again, Kamala Harris, 46% to 31%. And again, Republicans, 24% of them are just like, no, I don't want to talk to either one of them. Whereas only 9% of Democrats, right? Again,
almost 3 times as many Republican voters would vote for I don't want to speak to any of them. And that tells you an awful lot, which these are indications that Trump is losing his own voting pack. So when you go back to the thing I always talk about, which is consolidate your own vote, nick some independents, nick some of the others. Trump is not consolidating his own vote. He is losing some of his base here. Here are indications in several of these questions that you have Republicans deserting him, actually beginning to say, I wouldn't like to have a conversation with. I've seen him in debate. He's a bit of a dick. I don't actually want, he's not the sort of guy I'd like a casual conversation with, and he doesn't share my values. And I've seen a number of threads. People have been saying it on some of my threads. I've been seeing it on some of these voting threads where people have been saying, I live in Indiana, for example, was one of mine today, and there are far fewer placards outside people's houses saying vote Trump than there were in 2020 and 2016. And I've seen that's repeated right across the country of the US and across many threads that I've read. Is a really common claim, that one.
Republicans there, and definitely independents. You had 28% of independents, even though Kamala Harris won these group of voters. You have a lot of people on the Republican side going, I don't want to talk about Donald Trump, right? That's good for the Democrats. Okay, here's the one. Next one. Who's the candidate that appeared more dignified? 53% for Kamala Harris to 26% for Donald Trump.
That's
okay,
double.
So now we found one where Donald Trump actually is in the lead, right? Stumbled and didn't appear sharp. Donald Trump 49%, Kamala Harris 22%. Okay, and it'll be interesting, like, of Republicans, yeah, only 41% said Kamala Harris was stumbling and all that. There's your cop-out of 38% because they knew he lost. Only 6% Democrats said Kamala Harris. And only 16% of independents said so. So I guess that shows you who they thought the stumbling moron who was talking about eating dogs was. Now, who won the debate here? Registered voters, 50% for Kamala Harris and 24% for Donald Trump. And this goes with the CNN poll that it was 2-1. I mean, the CNN poll was basically 2-1. This, when you take out none and skipped, is 2-1. Democrats overwhelmingly thought that Kamala Harris won, but only 53% of Republicans thought that he won. And now,
so this Ipsos Mori poll shows that 53% of Republicans thought that Donald Trump won the debate, but 91% of Democrats did. So, like, even though you've got your partisan, I'm always going to vote for my guy, the Democrats completely overwhelmingly voted for Kamala Harris winning that debate, and only 53% of Republicans. Now, Fox News analysts can say what they like, but data like this is diamond and gives you a much better indication of how that debate went and whether this will translate into people becoming disaffected with Trump and the Trump-Vance ticket and either not vote or transfer their vote to Kamala Harris. So it's all going to be about registering. It's all going to be about registering and making sure even if you are registered, you get out to vote, and then who you vote for. And you might get a lot of Republicans that I would suggest from this kind of data is that you're more likely to get disaffected Republicans who won't be bothered to get out and vote at all.
This comes to a bigger question, which is, will there be a segment of the Republicans that all of a sudden just say, I'm not going to vote this election. I really don't care who wins. Because, see, that's where the Democrats were a few months ago. I don't care who wins. That Republicans might be falling into that trap now. If all of a sudden you're looking at 31% saying, neither one of them won, when there was a clear winner, okay, you might have a lot of Republicans staying home on election day that just don't care.
what I'm doing with this, and you might find this really boring going through the crosstabs, but when I come up with opinions, right, I want you to understand that my opinions aren't just pulled out my posterior. So when I have some confidence that Kamala Harris won the debate, I can look at data to suggest that actually that's genuinely what most people thought. And even the Republicans behind the scenes, the Republicans, though they might not have admitted it explicitly, their answers to these kind of surveys showed that they really thought that Kamala Harris won as well. And they are getting disaffected to the point where I think you can make a prediction, at the moment at least, assuming nothing changes. If it all keeps going as it is at the moment, you might well get a lot of Republicans who do not, or a significant enough amount of Republicans who do not feel enthused enough to vote for Trump. And in these battleground states where you are worrying about tens of thousands of people, that is hugely meaningful.
They're like, wow, I watched that guy. This is the first time I've really watched him. He's talking about eating dogs and bacon and stuff like that. I can't go out and vote for him. Now, this one's a very interesting one. Which of the following describes your opinion, even if neither is exactly right? Trump's verbal attacks on Harris made me 57% of people saying less likely to vote for Trump. Now, of course, the Democrats are always going to say that, but if you look at independents, 59% say they're less likely to vote for Trump because of his attacks. 21% of Republicans say that they're less likely to vote for Donald Trump because of his attacks on Kamala Harris. Now, if we look at the same thing when it comes to Kamala Harris on Donald Trump, we see that it pretty much goes the way it is. Democrats are still less likely to vote for Trump. Republicans are less likely to vote for Harris, and this was 50-50, and it probably is a split based on leaners. This is exactly where it is. So this shows that Kamala Harris attacking Donald Trump really didn't have an impact at all.
A negative impact.
But Donald Trump attacking Kamala Harris did have an impact. But again,
negative impact.
The whole idea with this debate was just kind of throw debate at him, let him destroy himself. Like, she didn't even have to do anything. She just let him destroy himself. All right, so that's all for
So anyway, I know that's been a super long video, but I'm trying to give you a sense of all of these data points coming in and all of these different analysts saying, right, registration's up, it's looking good. If 85% of the people registering are going to vote, then that's really good. And we're looking like we're getting a lot more Democrats, even though some of the figures suggest more Republicans, but actually they're skewed. Certain states aren't included in important states. And actually, when you look at this data, it's looking very good. And you got the Swift spike, the Swift effect, and et cetera, et cetera. And then you look at Wisconsin poll, and you look at the crosstabs, and you look at CNN and the Ipsos Mori post-debate polls, and you look at the crosstabs, and you start building up a picture that actually Donald Trump is in a lot of trouble. And then when you look at his campaign speeches and what he's doing at the rallies and what he's talking about, you think, my goodness, he's not doing the right things to attract people from the center, to attract people from the other side of the aisle. And Harris is doing those things, and that is borne out in the data. So hopefully through this whole mess of a presentation talk, whatever I'm doing, whatever this is, you get a sense of things are looking. At the moment, I think, as Simon Rosenberg always says, I'd rather be the Democrats at the moment than the Republicans. I think the Republicans are in a weak position at the moment, and they need to change things up and sort out their campaign strategy, because I don't think it's working at the moment, and the stats are looking good for the Democrats. But there's a long time to go. A lot can change. Anyway, hopefully that's of some use to you. It's a massive one. Take care. Speak soon. Toodle pips.